It's my pleasure, my deep pleasure, to introduce our keynote this morning, Dr. Patrick Camangian, Cam, a professor at University of San Francisco, among other things, and he'll share that. But I first had the pleasure of hearing Cam speak in 2008, I think, at a middle school one evening, and I was immediately inspired by his energy and perspective regarding ways in which we might walk alongside our young folks towards liberation. Cam's work has always been healing-centered and about building protective factors amidst crisis and chaos and in systems that are not designed to hold us or heal us. And so today we offer you, Cam, and his wisdom, his words, his experience as we're thinking about humanizing, bravely humanizing school spaces and ourselves. Welcome, Cam.
Good morning, Audie. Thank you so much for the welcome, and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I would definitely want to begin by expressing my deep appreciation for Oriana for inviting me here today and back in the day to speak at the school she was working at, as well as Leora, Nikki, and others for the invitation. And for all of the logistics and communication. I am truly, truly grateful to all of you. The title of my presentation this morning is Sustaining My Community. And I see that there's different titles, different places. It all gets at the same kind of thing. It is a response to the many critically conscious educators who find themselves disappointed with a lot of the isolation that they are faced with when taking positions or having positions at their schools, in their districts, or their institutions, right? And so the need for transformation, the need for community building seems daunting. And for many reasons, many will remain passive while somehow waiting for some way, critical mass of like-minded, socially transformative colleagues might increase. And listening to their dilemmas and reflecting on my own experiences as an educator seeking community throughout my career always raises these interesting questions for me to ponder. What does it mean to sustain community as socially transformative educators? In other words, does socially transformative collaboration only happen after the conditions that trouble us are resolved? Or does how we actually respond to intersecting systems of oppression help shape the spaces we have in communities and schools? What moves me as an educator who builds community or tries to organize humanizing spaces in schools and beyond is inspired by interdisciplinary thinking, right? Thinking beyond education. And so I read these texts. I didn't read these texts and then build community, but I think in reading these texts after I did really helps affirm the approaches that I took with others collectively, and justify going about building community the ways that the collectives and the community spaces I have been a part of have taken to build community. And so in her recent book, Princeton sociologist Ruha Benjamin, she argued that small things, seemingly minor actions, have like exponential effects to affirm life, foster well-being, and invigorate society and local communities. She calls this viral justice, because what this coronavirus has taught us was to respect the potential of the microscopic. And so the point of viral justice is to not wait for top-down change to provide us the kind of collective or larger space that we're seeking to have as socially transformative educators, but instead to start with where we stand and who we stand there with. And with that in mind, maybe want to hear from some of you real quickly. What small acts do you think you can take, or what small acts have you taken to build community with like-minded educators. And so I'll just read a few for the sake of time. This workshop for sure. SCRR, checking in with colleagues throughout the day. Facebook groups. Informal get-togethers are the best. Joining coalitions. Creating art circulo to meet monthly. Beautiful. Safe spaces for staff. Phone calls, text messages showing up. Thank you. Another text that really informs the ways in which I have tried to build community is the work of Adrienne Marie Brown, right? Everyone, I don't know, many people here tap into Adrienne Marie Brown, who argues that we must build community towards what we really long for, right? What is it that we really long for? And to make sure that pleasure is part of our community building, not just something we finally award ourselves with after meeting our goals and objectives first, right? And I guess please hit the chat answering the question, what is it that you long for in community? And what would bring you pleasure when collaborating with others? Healing spaces for healers, like the work of school crisis recovery and renewal. Time to reflect, time to pause, collaborate, compassionate connection, action, wise communication, community wisdom, free art spaces in nature. That's beautiful. Time to just chill, unplug, recharge. Okay, so keep answering and keep reading what people have to share, as it will inspire one another to imagine what we can create for each other. And so lastly, I'm also moved by the work of Cal Berkeley law professor and director of their Othering and Belonging Institute, John Powell, who writes about the importance of bridging. Right? Bridging builds community across perceived differences, right? Bridging builds community across perceived differences through human connection, right? Not just organizing politically, getting to the grind, put in the work, meet our objectives, meet our goals, right? But instead building community across perceived differences through human connection and heart-centered conversations, right? Conversations where we're sharing who we are, where we're making connections, where we might be vulnerable, but we're building a connection with people in ways that acknowledge our different complexities with the purpose of moving in a common direction, right? It's not conversation for conversation's sake, which is wonderful. I think we should all engage in that daily and often, but this is with the purpose of moving in a common direction. So I think I ask all of you to reflect on your life, personal, community, family, and even professional, and ask, like, how have heart-centered conversations helped you establish human connection across what you thought was tension or perceived differences? What are ways you have had heart-centered conversations that help you build with people you did not think you would build with? Definitely, when you connect with folks who you do not think you could build with, it gives you this renewed belief in community, renewed belief in humanity. Connecting with gives people insights into experience experiences we didn't think we knew. It connects people, right? You have to allow for grace, make it a safe space for others to express their thoughts comfortably, bravely, recognize common values, right? And all of this sort of helps us foster connection. So keep those answers coming. But in essence, I think for me, I think these texts really give me new ways of thinking about and also affirm the ways that I have worked with others to help sustain my educator community. All right. And so I'm going to, you don't have this in your slides because I wanted to just keep the pictures to myself and maybe somewhat limit the access to them publicly. And I think in essence, when we think about sustaining our communities, the main thing we need to do first is cultivate community by connecting with critical mass of like-minded stakeholders. And so I'm going to share with you a few, depending on time, case studies in my life where I was able to cultivate community with a critical mass of like-minded educators. And so early in my career, when I first started teaching at Crenshaw High School in Los Angeles, it was a huge staff, right? 180, 185, 190, 200 people. Comparatively diverse to other schools, right? There were many administrators, many counselors, many teachers of color, many Black educators, right? But so many, what's that saying? They say that not all skin folk or kinfolk, right? Not all people of our sort of cultural, linguistic, class backgrounds have the same perspectives as one another, right? And so I was noticing that many of the educators or people in our meetings had deficit perspectives about the primarily Black and brown students attending the school and even the community and families that the school served, right? And as an early career teacher, I had a group of friends, my age group, who were people of color, Black folks, BIPOC, who were fun to hang out with, right? And we would enjoy spirits, we would enjoy food, we would kick it after school daily and especially on Fridays. But we didn't all together share the sort of social justice motivations that brought me into education, right? And so we would kick it, we would enjoy each other's company, but the extent to which we bonded was based on how much fun we could have as young or early career teachers of color, right? And my students really thought that these teachers were cool, quote unquote, but really didn't talk about them as agents of change the way they did other teachers. And so the teachers pictured here, we sought each other out after hearing about one another from our students. And our first meeting we decided to have was at a happy hour where we each told stories, right? Heart-centered conversations to have human connection about who we were and how we came to the work and how we ended up at Crenshaw High School. And so this helped us build community where we focused on trying to shape the conversations that were being had at school-wide meetings so that we could increase like the adult critique of social oppression and focus on social justice. And we agreed at the end of this first meeting that we'll meet again next month for happy hour on our next payday, where we each bring 1 to 2 like-minded people. And so we brought other people and they all shared who they were, what experiences shaped who they were, and what brought them to the work and what brought them to Crenshaw High School. And so after our third meeting, we agreed that there had to be more than that. We all noticed like there were all these kind of like problematic perspectives being shared in our meetings, and we came up with a strategy. And we agreed that there had to be more than one dissenting voice against this sort of cacophony of problematic perspectives that were dominating department and school meetings. Everyone felt, right, or were triggered by a lot of the problematic perspectives being shared, but no one really voiced out their concerns, or there would be like one lone or two kind of lone voices resisting the kind of ignorance that was being shared in their deficit perspectives. And so we agreed that there needed to be more than one voice that were resisting the reactionary perspectives of those who had deficit perspective. And so we agreed that after one person spoke up against a deficit perspective, that a different member of this collective that we were beginning to call the Crenshaw Cougar Cadre would also speak up if that person was challenged, right? Because those, what Jeff Duncan Andrade calls gangsters, right? Those people just dominate space. Their bigotry is united. Whether they're actually formally united, informally, they're just protecting their sort of ignorance, right? And we needed another person, a different person to step up. And if there was another sort of problematic perspective, a different person in our cadre needed to challenge that perspective until everyone in the cadre's voices were heard. And eventually, those with the most problematic perspectives began being more careful with their comments, with their problematic perspectives, because they knew that they were going to be challenged, right? And so all eyes were on each person. So you had to carefully think about what you were going to contribute, or you're going to be called out for your problematic perspectives. And so finally, we were doing that. And after a few more meetings, that we decided that we wanted to seize leadership positions on campus from people who had deficit perspectives on the community, who were hoarding resources, who were taking Eurocentric, heteronormative, patriarchal approaches to teaching, right? Hegemonic approaches to education. We wanted to seize leadership positions to transform that, and that we would support one another in being elected to these different positions. And so I didn't want any of that kind of administrative leadership work, right? So I just, they said that I should volunteer to facilitate professional development for the 25% union that was contracted, for the 25% of the professional development that the union was contracted to have every month. And so the PDs are facilitated, focused on culturally relevant, socially transformative approaches to student-teacher relationships, pedagogy, and assessment. And so what started off as a happy hour cocktail evolved in ways none of us imagined, and we were able to transform the types of conversations we were having as a school. And so we continued to organize, and this group eventually started a small social justice school on campus. And some of us eventually ascended into leadership of the second largest union in the country. And the person standing next to me here, Alex Capuro Pearl, even we and others helped collectively elect him as the president of the second largest union in the country. And so I went to UCLA, I graduated, I took a position at the University of San Francisco. So when I first got to the University of San Francisco, a culturally conservative, private Jesuit, predominantly white serving institution, right? Similarly to Crenshaw, school-wide meetings really reflected this sensibility, as well as the sort of predominant demographic of the teaching profession, right? And it was very different than the communities that we were studying social justice education for. So it was a real culture shock. And midway through my first year, I decided to take what I had learned at Crenshaw High School to plot the transformation of my experience at USF by connecting with others, right? And through seemingly natural collaborations with the very few like-minded colleagues there at the time, some pictured here, we increased our sphere of influence. We organized with other faculty who were sensitive to our purpose to leverage the university's social justice ethic to increase a critical mass of critically conscious faculty, staff, and students of color. Because universities will say they're about social justice. But then when you look at what we're actually doing, you'll see that it's actually incongruent with the university's mission. So we said, if you are about social justice, then we need to actually have people from similar communities than the ones we are talking about here as faculty, here as staff, here as students, so that it is aligned with the mission, and it was part of their interest convergence, so they agreed, right? And so we have this critical mass of like-minded BIPOC and white co-conspirators, which led to a lot more honest, authentic, and insightful conversations dealing with issues pressing to BIPOC. And it required school-wide a lot of humility, deep listening, and respect. It also helped create collectively throughout the university, throughout the School of Education, and in the schools that our students were working at, collective identity among like-minded people in our rapidly transforming School of Education. And so this led to us eventually starting the Center for Humanizing Education and Research, right? The collective that built community to transform the School of Education at the University of San Francisco, then wanted to formalize a space for us that we called CHER, where we built community with faculty, staff, and community through heart-centered conversations. And to increase our exposure, we also organized a speaker series to help contribute to the conversations about confronting dehumanization in society and school, right? And so that was the University of San Francisco. In the community and beyond, I was presenting at workshops, right? Teachers for Social Justice and all these other kind of conferences locally, and speaking at schools. And this really gave me access to a larger body of like-minded people beyond my individual sites. So I was meeting a critical mass of people locally, regionally, and nationally. And through this networking, I was able to meet people with a similar political will, similar political perspective. And we eventually convened at one of our houses for an initial meeting, right? And pictured here. And this evolved into a standing meetings that eventually led to the formation of what we call the People's Education Movement, which was a collective of multiracial teachers of color, where we tried to make sure that people of color made up the majority, 75%. And we used the strengths and commitments of white allies and co-conspirators, and women identifying and queer folk were the majority of decision makers in this organization. Because of the critical mass we were training at USF, our students made up a strong membership base of the organization, right? As seen by the red arrows pointing at some of our students who started attending our general meetings. So I was starting to connect the institution and the organizational space in the community, these meetings were family friendly, as you see our children attending, and we made attempts to make space for elders. It was also a space where our USF instructors were a part of. And I was one of the co-founders and the steering committee chair for the People's Education Movement Bay Area. And I recruited a collective in Chicago, right? So now I'm thinking about building community nationally to start a chapter of their own, right? And so all of us really see People's as a space of and an opportunity for us to help define what social justice education should look like. And for us, like, education should be intersectional and anti-colonial, right? And so People's was a space for educators and community members who were alienated, who felt alienated at their schools, to find community, to build with like-minded people, to organize with others who have a similar political will, and to simply be a part of something larger than themselves. Organizing People's led to cross-organizational collaborations where, a collective of us then formed an alliance across organizations with the Baltimore Algebra Project, the Allied Media in Detroit, with Brotherhood Sister Soul in Harlem, and other organizations across the country that became the Education for Liberation National Network. This led to us locally in the Bay Area to host a biannual Free Minds, Free People conference, where 1,500 people, counselors, administrators, community-based educators, activists, administrators, and teachers gathered to problematize, strategize, and promote an education for liberation. And we rotate the location of this different cities across the country. And of course, we would often celebrate, find pleasure, and dance, and celebrate with spirits along the way. Over recent years, we've taken the same approach to build similar spaces and sustain community in San Francisco Unified School District's Ethnic Studies program, with students from USF being pipelined into SFUSD to engage in a lot of socially transformative, humanizing work. Reflecting on these experiences, after being asked to do this keynote, I learned that sustaining community meant engaging in a 5-step process. And I probably won't get through everything, but I think first step that we can do is connect with the people at our sites who are like-minded, who the students might name as being interested in the same sort of justice politics that we're interested in, or just start with the contacts we have, right? Identify potential partners, collaborators, key leaders at our sites, maybe integrating ourselves with different spaces. I think another thing we need to do is build our contacts, network, and really do our best to get a sense of what everyday people in the community are experiencing, so that we are building community with those communities that we say we are serving. I think after that, we should be sure to maybe formalize this community in some way, right? Maybe have some standing meetings, maybe have some type of collective, maybe some kind of name, some kind of formality but before we get into any kind of work, I think it's important that we engage in heart-centered conversations. And here's a series of kind of conversations that we have used for different meetings to establish human connection across difference before we get into the hard grind of collective work. And so you might have it in the slides. And so after there, we start doing a SWOT analysis where we look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then if you wanted to formalize even further, think about points of unity, a vision and mission for your collective. And then from there, I think we can imagine, right? Now that we formed this space together, what kind of space, go-to space would we like to help offer people, right? Is it an arts in nature space that is unique to the field that others can collectivize, can imagine, and can create? Or what else, whatever else, right? What kind of hub for meaningful change can people go to advance their interests that isn't out there for those of us who feel dehumanized in schools, institutions, and districts? I think from there, we might think about mobilizing, right? If you want to grow further, how do we grow your formation, grow our formation so that we can increase our impact? And at that point, I think there might be different initiatives, there might be different committees that really represent the interests of our multiple constituents, so that the work we're doing at our school is a bridge to the work that needs to be done in the community. We're in the parts of the community that our school is typically not in, and that we're also in spaces that the most marginalized in the community can have access to. Perhaps similar to what we did in SFUSD, we could influence policy and practice. And then maybe we think about creating a clearinghouse of resources that we could share with others. The Liberated Ethnic Studies model, who is pioneering a clearinghouse of resources for teachers to engage in liberated ethnic studies at their school sites across the country. And then lastly, I think we need to maintain these spaces, right, so that they're sustainable. And I think some ways that we can do that is to do ongoing collective self-reflection. We need to do ongoing check-ins. We need to revisit our mission, revisit our vision. We need to do a SWOT analysis often. We need to make sure that we're responding to an ever-changing context, and we have to engage in horizontal leadership and democratic processes so that the people involved in our community can feel invested and have some type of ownership over the collective space that you have put together for one another. And so I think my joy has come from working collectively to collaborate so that the profession is less hostile to our humanity, our practice, and our purpose. And that's how I sustain community. Thank you.